Hey everyone, this is Lyndon. Welcome back to another ActionVFX.com tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at the large-scale smoke plumes from ActionVFX.com. These are really cool. At the time that I made this tutorial, they had just come out pretty recently, so we're all kind of excited about these smoke plume elements. But don't confuse these with the original smoke plume elements you can get from the free section. Those are pretty cool, but these are like large-scale smoke plumes, and these do vary in different aspects, like they have shadows and everything. But they're really cool, and we're just going to be looking at a whole bunch of cool techniques about how we can composite this into a real-life shot. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. Alright, I'd like to start by dragging the footage into a new composition. Hold over that icon. Alright, so the first thing we gotta do is track the scene, and I think the best option we have for this shot is to do a 3D track, since the camera is panning across and there's, like y-axis orientation, so it's best that we have a camera. So we'll right click and choose track camera. Okay, now that the 3D camera tracker is finished, we can then create a camera, and any layer that is now three-dimensional will be subject to the motion of this camera. Okay, sounds great. So let's go ahead and drag in our first smoke plume element. Okay, again, we got this from ActionVFX.com, a really cool smoke plume element, and we're going to think about where we're going to composite this. So let's just put it right behind this building here, just like that. Now we do need to do some masking, rotoing work here to put it behind the building, but we'll worry about that a little bit later. So we're going to do several different smoke plume elements. So I'll just go ahead and drag in another one. Just kind of adjust their timings. So the plume is a little more mature. Okay, and we definitely need to make these three-dimensional layers so they'll follow the motion of the camera. So over here, we'll check the three-dimensional icon. And we can see here that they, definitely do follow the motion of the scene. Okay, so this one I kind of want to be over here, and this one put behind that little section of the building. Kind of get what we're doing here. We can adjust the scale and everything, so let's just do this 80. And since this one's a little further away, we'll make it a little bit smaller. We'll do something like 80 as well. And although this smoke plume looks a little smaller from the get-go, so we don't have to scale it down that much to make it look really far away. Okay, and then we're going to composite several other smoke plumes, and I'll go ahead and do that now. Just go ahead and drag them in here. Make sure you make it a three-dimensional layer. Just kind of position it in time how you like it. And these smoke plumes have a really long duration, so you can choose like any section of this plume to add just variation to the shape. I'll scale this one down just a little bit and position it accordingly. Maybe I'll just put it here. Okay, just like that, we have several different smoke plumes distributed throughout the scene. Looking really cool with all different variations and size and shape. Okay, so at this point, I think it's time we start working on those rotos I was talking about. Now, what we technically could do is apply a mask directly to the layer. Like that. But you see, before I created this tutorial, I had a little bit of practice positioning these smoke elements exactly where I want them. But see, in your shots, you may position, a smoke element in one place, and you might want to reposition, make adjustments. And if we already apply this mask, and then you change the position, it's just going to mess up the mask, and it's not going to fit the scene. So we got to find a better way to do this. This is what we're going to do. This is a pretty cool technique. What we'll do is create a new solid, and a green solid is fine. We'll call this Matte 01. We'll place this right above the smoke element. Okay, and before we do anything else, it's very important that we make sure this matte layer is 3D. Okay, so that way it'll follow the motion of the camera. So we'll kind of position it, maybe just rotate it a little better. And let's go ahead and shut it off. Alright. Now let's keep our matte layer selected. Let's hit the pen tool, let's kind of zoom on in here. Let's turn off the smoke layer, and we'll draw a mask around the edge of this rooftop. Okay, so maybe you kind of get the picture there. And what we're going to do is go to this smoke plume layer. And we'll toggle switches till we see the track matte feature here. And then we'll click the drop down menu and hit alpha inverted. So this smoke plume layer will not exist where the matte layer is. So the cool thing about this is we can move the smoke layer around wherever, we can change the scale, do whatever we need to, and it's not going to mess up this roto we have around the rooftop. So I think that's a really cool technique, and you'll find yourself using that quite often. So So what we can kind of do to improve this edge here, maybe let's add 1 pixel of feather like that, and I like to add a roughen edges effect to make it look a little more natural. Let's turn the border down to about 1, turn the edge sharpness down to about 0.5, and the scale down to 25. Okay, so we have a little roughness around that edge. And that should help it look, like I said, more natural. And it's also important that you make sure that matte, even though it's following the camera motion with that with the camera tracker, we also do need to make sure the matte completely sticks with every edge, because there is a little bit of perspective involved and it's not going to be perfect. So what we do is add a keyframe to the mask path, we move forward in time, and just kind of reposition it to make sure it doesn't fall away any amount from the exact edge. Okay, that looks pretty good. And what we're going to do is pretty much repeat this same rotoing process for each of these smoke elements. So we'll create a solid, we'll make the solid a 3D layer, we'll apply the mask to the solid, and we'll use the track matte feature on the smoke plume to honor any foreground elements that should be in front of the smoke. Okay, so now that we've created a matte for each individual smoke plume element, it's now time to get kind of to the fun part, and we're going to color match these smoke plume elements. And this is probably a big part in compositing elements like these. So let's pick one of these big front smoke plumes. This one will do just fine. And the first effect we're going to apply is a curves adjustment. Apply this to the smoke plume layer. And so we're working with log footage. That means it has really low contrast. So we need to try to match the shadows of the smoke plume layer to the footage. So we'll grab the shadows and just kind of lift it up like that. Now we're getting the shadows kind of right, but it's making the effect too bright in general. So what we can do is bring down the highlights and then just kind of bring down the gamma a little bit. So we're kind of matching that contrast, but at the same time keeping the right luminance. So that looks pretty cool. And it's also a good idea to get a quick grade layer to make sure that it looks okay when you kind of apply that final bit of contrast. So it does look pretty good. We have a before, it's far too dark, and then we take away some of that contrast. It just looks much better. So now what we can do is copy this curves effect to all the other smoke plumes. And you might just want to make little adjustments to each smoke plume layer, because they're going to be in different areas of the scene. The environment's going to be a little different in that section of the footage, so you just might want to make just slight adjustments. Okay, for sure, yeah, that's looking pretty realistic. Okay, at this point things look pretty good. We've pretty well composited these elements into the scene. So there are a few last pretty cool details we can add. So since these smoke plumes are actually so large, they would actually be blocking light, in a sense creating light rays, just like clouds. And this is probably pretty important to think about. So you can possibly add some shadows here, but what I'm going to do is kind of create some light rays coming from these smoke plume elements, just to get a pretty realistic atmospheric look. So I'll start out with this big element here in the center, and what I'll do is create a new solid. Let's make this a 3-dimensional layer so it will follow the motion of the camera, and we'll kind of rotate this along the y-axis so that the layer is kind of facing towards us, and this is the direction the light rays are going to follow. Okay, what we can do is just scale it up, and at this point we're going to go ahead and add fractal noise. And just pay attention as I adjust a few of these settings. Let's go ahead and uncheck uniform scale, and we'll increase the width. So maybe it makes a little bit of sense what I'm doing here. Turn down the complexity. Okay, so something kind of like this. Let's turn down the brightness to maybe -25, and we'll animate the evolution. So we'll do this with an expression. We'll hold alternate, click the stopwatch, and we'll set this time times maybe 60. So nothing too rapid. And we do also, as this smoke kind of escalates upward or floats upward, we want this light rays to kind of follow the motion of the smoke. So we'll also animate the offset turbulence. So we'll add a keyframe here. And we'll just kind of move it up like this. Alright, now it's time that we mask these light rays correctly. Okay, so something kind of like that. Now let's add some feather. Yeah, that looks pretty great. And now that we did that, it's important to turn the blending mode to none so we don't get any of the original solid in there. Alright, so let's toggle switches and we'll turn the blending mode of this layer to overlay. Overlay should work pretty good. Okay, so it's looking pretty creepy at this point, but what we'll do is just turn down the opacity to something like 15. Yeah, that looks pretty good. See there, we got some kind of light rays or shadows coming out from the smoke plume layer. And I mean, everything works pretty well. I mean, this is a 3D layer, it's going to follow the camera. There shouldn't be any issues. I'd also like to duplicate this layer a couple times, and maybe we'll move it over to here. And we don't want any sharp ends here, so what we'll do is create another mask like this. We'll set this to subtract and feather it out a lot. Okay, we can copy this mask to the other light ray. And we do want to be sure that these layers aren't intersecting one another. We can see this line here. That's because the light ray is intersecting with the smoke layer. What we'll do is just drag these below all the smoke layers, and we'll set an adjustment layer between those two, and it'll separate these two sets of layers so that they don't intersect. And by the way, this is actually a really cool technique, so remember that. If you ever have some intersections that you don't like, just put an adjustment layer there and it'll pretty much work a miracle. And each time we duplicate these light rays, what we can do is go to the evolution options and change the random seed so we get a completely different look. We're also getting some kind of rough, nasty edges here. It's usually a good idea to work in 16 or 32 bits per channel. And that's going to add a finer range of colors and allow it to smooth out better. So if we want to add one last detail, maybe like some shadows, we'd kind of use the same techniques. Let's just create a solid, make this a dark black solid. We'll make it 3-dimensional so it'll follow the motion of the camera. And we'll kind of orient it like so. And I'll kind of position this down here. And what I'll do is just go ahead and draw a mask around the place we want this shadow to exist. And once we got the mask how we like it, we'll apply a little bit of feather. Looks pretty cool, and then we'll turn down the opacity of the layer. And pretty much we'll repeat this same exact process for all the other shadow layers. Okay, so we're finished with all of these shadows now. And it's definitely a good idea to also drag these shadow layers below the separation so we don't have any of those intersections. Yeah, just to be safe so we don't have any glitches or issues. It's always good to err on the side of caution because I notice a lot of beginner visual effects clips just are full of glitches, and it's because they don't just take the safe route, you know. Do things the safe way and keep your shots clean and limit the glitches as much as possible. And another thing we can do with these smoke plume elements is just illuminate different sections of the footage. Like down here near the ground, it should be a little darker because there's more shadows, and that's going to help it blend in a little better. So to do this, I'll just add a simple fill effect, and I'll apply this to the smoke plume. Let's make the color pure black, and we'll do that so it'll darken a certain section. What we'll do is grab a mask out the bottom here. Let's apply a little bit of feather, and what we're going to do is apply the effect to this mask. So this fill effect only exists inside the mask. So we'll double click on the fill effect. We'll go down here to the compositing options, hit the plus, and that's going to apply a mask. Apply the first mask, and we can change the feather a little bit. And we also want to go to the compositing options of the fill effect and turn down the effect opacity. So we can kind of change the brightness of this smoke plume in the bottom area. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much all we can do to this shot. Definitely been pretty fun today. Nothing too difficult. We just went over some really sweet fundamental compositing techniques. You know, tracking, positioning, rotoing, color matching, and of course, you know, bringing in our own touch of creativity with details like shadows and light rays. Don't forget to stop by the website, all kind of awesome free stuff. ActionVFX is really growing. In fact, as we speak, the ActionVFX crew is out shooting some amazing new elements with some pretty rad equipment like the Red Weapon 8K camera. So amazing. Those guys are awesome. And you guys be sure to get your stock footage from ActionVFX.com. Just really enhance those shots. My name is Lyndon, and I really hope to see you in the next tutorial from ActionVFX.com. Thank you.